Okay, let's dive right into this. In today's explainer, we are looking at a situation that's, quite frankly, an unprecedented crisis in our democracy, something that demands our immediate attention. We're talking about the foundational right to vote, and more importantly, having those voices accurately counted. And right now, the source material we're looking at argues that right is under severe threat. We're seeing reports of a systemic breakdown of the electoral process paired with literal state violence against citizens. This isn't just some minor procedural hiccup, you know? The materials assert it is a profound violation of our constitutional rights. So we're going to unpack exactly what happened, step by step, using the direct evidence presented. Because the sheer magnitude of this situation, it puts the very legitimacy of our democratic system at stake. Let's look at the reality of what actually occurred on the ground. Just listen to this quote. "Stop it. Don't hit the citizens." That was the shocking, visceral scene at the Jamsil, or Songpa, ballot counting station. According to the reports, peaceful citizens who were simply exercising their constitutional right to protest the movement of ballot boxes without official observers were met with a violent, brutal crackdown. These folks were literally just sitting or standing there, unarmed, not rioting. And yet the material alleges they faced a police response so violent it left blood on the ground. There's this one horrifying moment described where police officers actively attacked unresisting people, to the point where other officers actually had to physically pull their aggressive colleagues away, screaming at them to stop. It's a scene more characteristic of a totalitarian regime, right? Not a free democratic nation. So what exactly do we call this legally? The source frames this as doktik pokhang, abuse of authority causing injury. It is defined in law as a severe crime, where a public official completely misuses their state-sanctioned power to physically assault an individual. And let me be clear, the argument here is that the officers who attacked our unresisting citizens committed this exact, highly punishable crime. Period. But it doesn't stop there. Think about the other officers in uniform, the ones who just stood around and watched. According to the sources, they are guilty of a massive dereliction of duty. When the state turns its monopoly on force against citizens who are simply demanding transparency, well, a very, very dangerous line has been crossed. Now, here's a crucial, absolutely glaring detail about the police deployment that day. By law, officers executing their duties must be identifiable. Legal exceptions for masked policing? Those are meant for specialized tactical units like SWAT teams or strict health mandates like COVID-19 protocols. But during the Jamsil attack, these officers were wearing black masks, deliberately hiding their identities. The authors argue that masked policing without legal justification is entirely unconstitutional. And honestly, it strongly suggests that the state and these officers knew their violent actions against us were entirely illegal. Covering your face like that, it shows a conscious, deliberate violation of the democratic relationship between the state and its citizens. And that brings us to a central grievance here, a blatant violation of election protocols. It's absolutely outrageous. The sources report that police forcefully escorted ballot boxes entirely without our citizen observers present. I mean, how on earth can a legitimate election take place when the very people meant to guarantee its fairness are locked out? The argument is that by moving these boxes in secret under police escort, they completely destroyed the transparency of our election. The whole fundamental premise of a democratic vote is that the process is verifiable by the people. So removing us from the observation process, it completely strips us of our fundamental democratic rights and renders the contents of those boxes totally untrustworthy. But you see, the violence was really just a symptom of much deeper systemic breaches by the Election Commission. And this brilliantly illustrates how the whole system failed us. First, we have the blatant violation of Election Law Article 15, an arbitrary and illegal extension of voting time to 10 p.m. in specific locations. The Commission literally does not have the authority to alter legally set voting times. Then there's the violation of Article 108 regarding poll publication and blind voting. By letting voting and counting happen at the exact same time, the blind nature of the election was totally shattered. And on top of all that, unprecedented ballot shortages across numerous polling stations. People showed up to vote and were literally turned away because there was no paper. I mean, come on.
50. The Election Commission eventually admitted that exactly 50 polling stations lacked ballots. Now, they tried to brush this off, right? Claiming it's just 0.35% of the 14,288 total stations nationwide. But the source material fiercely rejects that dismissive excuse. In a true democracy, systematically denying any community the right to vote cannot just be waved away as statistically insignificant. There's no way. And honestly, given all the other systemic failures we've just talked about, can we even trust this self-reported number? This isn't just a tiny fraction, it's a catastrophic failure of the Election Commission's most basic, fundamental duty.
To put this into legal perspective, let's look at some undeniable global precedents for nullifying an election. Right now, in South Korea, the standard requires absolute, mathematical proof that an error actually changed the final outcome before an election is nullified. But contrast that with Austria in 2016 or Berlin. In Austria, they literally reran a presidential election just because mail-in ballots were opened by unauthorized personnel. The nullification there was based purely on a breach of procedural integrity. Or look at Berlin, where elections were nullified because, if you guessed it, ballot shortages. The point is, in a robust democracy, if there is even a possibility of impact due to systematic illegalities, that is grounds for nullification. That's how you maintain the sanctity of the vote.
And then there's the incredibly frustrating issue of the burden of proof. It is logically absurd. In our current system, if an election is mismanaged, the burden actually falls on us, the citizens, to mathematically prove the errors. Think about how crazy that is. We don't have investigative powers. We can't go execute search warrants. Compare that to the United Kingdom, where the Election Commission is actually held accountable. Over there, the Commission has to prove to the public that the election was fair and transparent. Requiring everyday citizens to scientifically prove state-level election mismanagement while the state itself holds all the evidence is just completely backward. We also need to talk about a fatal conflict of interest baked right into our judicial system. Here in South Korea and places like Brazil, sitting judges also serve as the chairs of the Election Commission. Do you see the massive problem here? The very judge who oversees the election is legally tied to the exact organization that citizens have to sue when the election is flawed. It completely violates the basic rule that no one can be a judge in their own case. Contrast this with the United States, which maintains a strict, hard separation to prevent exactly these kinds of conflicts. When your judges are intertwined with the Election Commission, getting impartial justice is practically impossible.
Now, you might be wondering, where was the media during all of this? Well, we have to call out the mainstream media's absolute betrayal and distortion of the truth here. Major outlets like Chosun, Jungang, Donga, and Kyunyang, total silence, or just throwing up trivial distractions. Hankook Ilbo was a rare exception, actually treating the 35-hour standoff at Jamsil as the top story it was. But then you have Hankure actively smearing peaceful citizens who were literally just defending their voting rights, calling them extremist. The silence and the smears from the media elite are in such stark, unbelievable contrast to the undeniable physical reality of what we all witnessed on the ground. And if you needed one final piece of context, consider this. The Central Election Commission is currently under criminal investigation for embezzlement regarding its massive ballot printing budget. Yeah, you heard that right. They requested a budget to cover over 10% of the electorate, yet somehow failed to print enough ballots, causing the shortages we saw. We simply cannot trust any numbers or official results provided by an election commission that is literally facing embezzlement charges over the very funds meant to secure our voting process. It's unbelievable. So, the crucial point is this. A partial fix just isn't going to cut it. Our entire nationwide democratic system must be restored. Based on all this overwhelming evidence, the sources lay out 3 unyielding demands. Number 1, a complete nationwide re-election. Number 2, strict, real criminal punishment for the officers involved in that violent Dokchik-Pokang against our citizens. And number 3, state compensation for the constitutional rights that were so blatantly violated. These aren't just polite requests, these are presented as the absolutely essential steps we must take to repair our broken democracy. Which leaves us with one final, absolutely critical question. Will we allow our sovereignty to be stolen? Are we really going to accept a system where votes are mismanaged, where our observers are locked out, and where citizens are met with violence just for demanding transparency? Absolutely not. We, as citizens, must stand together. We have to demand absolute accountability from the state, the election commission, and the media. We can never, ever surrender our constitutional rights. Thank you so much for joining me on this explainer. Stay vigilant, stay curious, and we'll see you next time.